Okay, well, it is 11:01. So, welcome everyone. We are so excited to have three of our upstate mayors to participate on our panel today. And pardon me too, I'm admitting people into the meeting, so if there's a little gap in my conversation, you will know why. We today have um, we thought it would be really fun. The Peak committee thought it would be really fun to talk to some mayors about some of the challenges they have, leadership challenges. We'll talk a little about multi-generational challenges and get an inner look into what it's like to be a mayor, how they became mayors, and what their other life, their real life, is all about too. So today we will have Mayor Brandy Amadon from Travelers Rest. She was elected in January 2018 and also is the first female and the youngest mayor in Travelers Rest history. We have Mayor Terence Roberts. He has been mayor of the city of Anderston since 2006. That's a while. And also Mayor Brandon Smith from Greenwood. He's been mayor since 2018. So, welcome everyone. Thanks for being with us. And what we'll do today is we'll have co moderators. We've got one of our co chairs of the Pique committee, Jason Weidman from ScanSource. And then the lovely Sarah Butler from USC Upstate is going to be co moderating. So it should be a really interesting conversation. We'll do questions via chat, and then after the panel, we will have a chance for everyone to open up their mic. So you can feel free to ask questions at that time. Unfortunately, Mayor Roberts has some business to take care of at 11:45. So I've I've asked him to front load all of his really good stuff, and we'll let him go a little bit early. So without further ado, Jason and Sarah, I will turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Justine, and thank you to all our mayors for being here today. This is really exciting, and like Justine said, a first of its kind for Peak. And we kind of did this non-traditionally. We thought instead of giving your background and your bio up front, we would kind of, this first question, in a way, will kind of tell our audience a little bit more about you. And we're curious, this is for all three of our mayors. How did you get your civic start? But also, we'd love to just hear a little bit more about your career background and your day job. One thing we talked about when putting this together is that it might be easy for some people to remember that mayors, that's not their only job. They also have a career that they came from and that most are still performing. So just a little bit on what your day job is, your background, and how you got your start in the civic sector. And I guess we'll let Mayor Brandy Amadon kick this one off. That's all right.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, I usually joke that the mayoring is my volunteer gig. I actually have a paying job too. So a little bit about how I got my start into civic life. Not really a political person by nature. I remember running for student council in sixth grade and lost to somebody else way more popular. So just really didn't pay attention to local things and even government, but grew up here in Travelers Rest, and it's my hometown. And when I was about 25, I heard about a guy who came onto city council in a special election and nobody ran against him. So he just signed a piece of paper and became a council member. And I remember being kind of irritated. And I was chatting with my husband over breakfast. I'm like, this is TR. There should be people lined up to serve. We're a great community. And my husband was like, well, don't complain about it. Just run. But I actually didn't know who my mayor was, and I didn't know anything about council. So I showed up to a council meeting and just learned that they really talk a lot about money and people. And my day job is I'm a CPA, so I live in the accounting and money world. And I was like, wait a minute, you talk about taxes a lot. And so felt I could contribute there. Ran my first time for a city council seat and lost by 16 votes. So try to remind people every vote is important. Ran again and then served and was elected and served on council for about 8 years. And then this is my 4th year as mayor, but love my job. My day paying job is I'm co-president and CFO of Brains on Fire, which is a creative marketing agency here in Greenville and then also in Los Angeles. So a little bit about me and how I became mayor.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Mayor Roberts, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I'll jump in there. And good morning. It's good to see everybody. It's good to see Brandy. We've known each other for a while and served on a couple of things. I haven't had the opportunity to meet Brandon yet, so I know he's fairly new in his position. But I've been probably unlike Brandy. I was a guy in high school that was the treasurer of the student body, the vice president of the student body, the president of the student body. So, and I did national conventions. So I ran a lot, middle school. And so I did do that at a young age. People always forget about that because after high school, you go through college. I came back to Anderston 33 years ago, grew up in Anderston, was living in Malden in Greenville County, and came back to open up a small business. I've been a State Farm agent for 33 years. And so being a small business owner, one of my charges, my mentor said, you have to volunteer, you have to get out there, you have to be with the chamber and the YMCA. So I got my civic background by just getting involved in a lot of nonprofits. And in some of those nonprofits, I worked my way up through the leadership role of, treasurer, vice president, president. So I've been chairman basically of a lot of the different nonprofits, from the chamber to the YMCA, and on a lot of things. And that kind of led me to politics. I somewhat ran for mayor on a dare. Nobody thought I'd win. I didn't even think I'd win. I was running against an incumbent, and got in a runoff and won, and I'm the mayor. And I know I didn't have council experience, and nobody's run against me since. And nobody wants the job, or maybe I'm doing a fairly good job. But I think just balance, and I know we'll probably talk a little bit about how we balance all of it, but I think I enjoy doing what I'm doing. I enjoy helping people. I enjoy helping my community. And so that's kind of how I got into politics.
Fantastic. Thanks for that answer. Mayor Smith.
Sure. Yeah, I want to just start by saying, as everyone knows, this is not a full-time job, which I see our city manager, Julie Wilkie, on here. Thank goodness for her. It's not a full-time job, or I would drive her crazy. I need to always remember that we have staff in place for a reason. So, but she's probably tired of hearing me tell this story, but it is true. When I campaigned, starting about 3 years ago now, I was reminded by my mom that in the 5th grade here in Greenwood, they asked us to write a paper about what we wanted to be when we grew up, and my paper was about wanting to be mayor of Greenwood. And at the time, I didn't live in the city limits, had no idea what that meant. But over time, that really just developed into wanting to give back in whatever way. It doesn't necessarily have to be mayor. There's many ways you can give back. But I lived in, my wife and I, after I graduated from law school, moved to Florence and lived in Florence for 9 years and loved Florence. But when I say we, my wife isn't from Greenwood. I always knew that I wanted to get back here. And so I had to convince her. And about 8 years ago, we moved back to Greenwood, and really kind of just went head first into getting into the community. I think when someone in their early 30s, I guess at that time, moves back. I think the thing that prepared me the most was in the neighborhood, the HOA sees a couple in the young 30s and says, you need to be on our HOA board. And that became president of the HOA. I think being president of my homeowners association prepared me more for being mayor than just about anything. But I remember again, it's been about 2.5 years, but it was only a few weeks after being elected mayor. We had a municipal conference. I remember meeting Brandy, and she said, you weren't on city council at all before? I said, no. And I kind of was thinking to myself, it's only been a few weeks. What have I gotten myself into? But it's been a pleasure. Julie, our city manager, and I started at the same time. I know most of y'all on here probably know Charlie Barano, who was our city manager for about 3 weeks after I got elected, went on to work with the municipal association as a field agent now for the Low Country. But I'm very, very fortunate for Julie and I to have really kind of started our paths at the same time. So it's been an interesting 13 months. I think every community is dealing with it, but I remember one time when I woke up, and kind of said to myself, why me? Why did it have to be me during this time? But I caught myself immediately and said, if it wasn't me, I don't know, what we would have done. Not to toot my own horn, but I feel like folks elected us to be involved in government in good times and bad. So I feel fortunate to have the responsibility that we have. And so feel fortunate to be on the panel with two mayors who've been going at it longer than I have, for sure.
That's great, and I love how all three of you, there was almost kind of like something early on in life that sparked you leading to where you are now. And Mayor Smith, I had to ask, as far as mudslinging contests, which one was worse, HOA or mayor? HOAs are brutal.
Yeah, fortunately for me, there has been no mudslinging.
That's good.
The HOA is interesting. It was and still is kind of a puppet regime, led by another close friend. But I'll tell the interesting fact about when I ran for mayor, I was the only one that had filed to run for mayor literally until the 11th hour. Filing closed August 15th at noon, and at 11 o'clock I had an opponent who I think was the best thing that could happen. It forced me to get out into all of the community, which I planned to do anyway, but it really forced me to get out there sooner rather than later. And she's a lady who to this day I consider a good friend, still comes to our council meetings, is still, I know her, I know her heart's in the right place with the community. I look at her as an asset. So that's
great.
Funny you'd ask that, because we never had any mudslinging, and she is still a very important part of our community.
That's great.
Well, I'll go ahead and kind of interrupt here, because it seems like you all had various paths to get to where you're going, and we can't talk about mayors without talking about leadership. So tell us a little bit about your leadership styles and your habits. So how about we start with Mayor Smith and then work our way backward?
Sure. Well, like I said, it's certainly been a learning experience over the last 2.5 years. And it is certainly something that you've got to balance in my life. I'm a lawyer. I was a trial lawyer from an insurance defense standpoint. So I used to do some State Farm work there, Mayor Roberts, but I did trial work for many years. Now I am general counsel for one of our largest local companies, Greenwood Mills and the Self family. And I'm fortunate to be able to do that, but it is certainly a balance. There's nights and weekends, and there are very few off the clock moments, as you know. But in terms of our leadership style, again, I like to try to, as much as possible, lead from a 30,000-foot level and not micromanage. But there are certainly things that I get my hands dirty on and can help out. I am a musician also, and so we've got a great Uptown Live and art scene here that I've kind of thrown myself into more so than probably some other mayors in the past, and it's a pleasure. But we've got a great team here in Greenwood, and I try not to. Julie probably may tell you that I sometimes stick my nose into things I probably shouldn't. But you know, there's certainly a lot more. I tell people there's a lot more to being mayor, or certainly even city council, than showing up the first and third Mondays of each month for a meeting. There's so many behind the scenes issues, meeting with industrial folks, notable guests that come into our town, and policy. And so it can be exhausting, but it's certainly rewarding for sure.
Thank you for that. Mayor Roberts, what's your leadership style or habits that you've developed in your time?
Thanks for asking. I think that's a good question. I get asked that a lot. I imagine that my background is my dad was a coach, a high school coach. He coached for 7 years, success of doing what he did. And he used to always talk about how, and I believe it too, that leaders aren't born, you know, leaders are made, and you develop leadership through active participation and doing things like
Mayor Roberts, I think we're having a bit of connectivity issue. So as that gets resolved, I just want to make sure I'm not cutting him off, but you know, technology is like the best and worst enemy here. But we'll go ahead and pivot to you, Mayor Amadon. Just get your thoughts about
just the mayor
style and habits until we can get him back in.
Oops.
I'm just glad it's Terence with the internet issues and not me. Not it. Do you want me to go ahead and go? Okay,
Please.
Yeah, we'll shoot him a message just to let him know.
Okay, great.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Leadership style, I think, is so important. I don't know if I knew it when I stepped into the mayor role, but you're really setting the tone for the entire city and also the staff. And so for me, my leadership style has always been like start with the sweet. I want to create a warm environment. I want to know about your kids, trying to establish relationship on a people level first. And I think one of the helpers for me is like, I typically was the youngest person when I walked into a room. It's not so much now, but I just sat in a meeting with some of our chiefs. It was all male and I was the youngest person in the room. And for me, it's helpful just to know people, know a little bit of background and the people side first. There's a really great article that kind of sums up my leadership style. It's from the Harvard Business Review about a happy warrior. And so it talks about warmth and strength, because as a leader, you're making decisions. Like, I'm happy to make a decision. If we're all going out to dinner and they're like, I don't know where to go, like, I got a spot for us and we'll make it happen. But you also have to have that warmth piece where you want people to understand that you care for them and are trying to make good decisions for them. And so that's kind of the balance that I try to bring into those situations. A lot of time we're telling people no. And so I want to have some type of established relationship up front before I like have to go in hard and say, no, I can't take care of you, or, putting type of restrictions on top of that relationship. So the warmth and the strength is the balance for me.
Thank you so much. Can we go back to you, Mayor Roberts? I think we kind of got cut out a little bit and you were talking about your leadership style, and I feel like I heard you say patience.
Patience. Yeah, I didn't say that, but you've got to have patience.
Okay.
But
We don't have that. That doesn't exist.
yeah. But I think what I was just listening to the mayor's talk, I think in our positions, we do have to connect people in these relationships and you know, you can read a lot about leadership, but you know, you some of the best lessons I've learned on leadership is just listening to people who have mentored me and have gone through the process. So I think that you always have to be active and learning in your leadership styles. And that changes from day to day and just depends on the situation or the circumstance that you're in regards to your leadership style at that particular moment.
Great. I'm glad we got to get your full answer. I appreciate that. I think we heard some of this next question in some of those responses, but from a leadership standpoint, we wanted to hear from the three of you on kind of what are your main do's and don'ts. And again, from a leadership standpoint, not from a political standpoint, I guess, but we'll keep it to that leadership conversation. Mayor Roberts, do you want to go ahead and kick off on that one?
Yeah.
Main do's and don'ts from a leadership
Do's
standpoint.
and don'ts. Don't point fingers. You know, I think that's important in our business because by not accepting blame for something that went wrong, I think that sends a bad signal to your teammates. I've woken up many a time and read a newspaper article about, say, a council meeting, and the mayor's getting the blame for maybe the tone of the council meeting or something. And I say I had nothing to do with it, but you know, but if I don't accept that responsibility for our council, you know, some of that's important. So I try not to point fingers and stay above the fray in that regards. I think it's important to involve people in the decision-making process. We all have one vote. We don't. We have city managers and we have one vote on our council, and we would be considered weak mayors. But I think through your leadership style, you can show some strength in regards to bringing your council together. And so, but my whole thing is that my council's changed over the last 15 years. We've had some consistency of people being there. We've had new people, and the dynamics of that team is always important going forward.
Great.
Good question.
Mayor Smith?
Sure. I think I from experience, I feel I can tell you more don'ts than do's, but in terms of do's, I certainly think just listening to others in the community and your fellow council members is the most important. I think a lot of times people just want to know that they're being heard, and that seems to be one of the most powerful things. And of course, attempting to find common ground with your constituents who may, on a controversial decision or a hotly contested decision, finding common ground with even the folks that are petitioning for you to do something other than what you're wanting to vote for. In terms of don'ts, I think I already mentioned micromanaging is as hard as that may seem sometime. Like I said, we've got a great team that is in good hands, and so it can be difficult. But another thing is I'm sure this is the same way in Travelers Rest or Anderston, but and of course the last 13 and a half months have been a little difficult on this, but in a normal time, I mean, there's an event every single night you could be at in theory. And I am a people person. I like to get out, but one thing I've learned is not to try to kill yourself in trying to be everywhere at the same place. Or if you do, just clone yourself somehow. But the last don't I will say is one that I'm half joking when I say this, but I was never on social media before I ran for mayor, and they told me, well, you got to get on Facebook if you're going to run for mayor. So I did under protest. But what I've learned, definitely don't do, is read the Facebook comments. And I think every elected official can probably tell you it's if you've never been on social media and then you get on and then you get elected and you read Facebook comments, you're taken aback at certain things. And so it's been therapeutic not to read the Facebook comments, but you still want to know what the real sense in the community is. I don't think that is the best way to find the real sentiment in the community.
I'll go next. That's funny. So I do read all the Facebook comments, mainly because I want to know where my crazies are. I see you and I want to know you up front, but one of my don'ts is for social media. Just don't engage. That is a spot, especially this past year, where people go to vent and complain. I like to think that it's a good information channel, and that's what I try to put out there, facts and adorable pictures of my daughter, because she's the best campaign mascot you could imagine. But don't engage, because that's not the avenue to have a conversation. So usually if somebody's coming after me hard, I will reach out to them on the side and say, like, want to go get coffee? It's probably somebody local. It might be somebody who lives out of state, which is funny to us who are mayors, that somebody from Virginia feels so invested in Travelers Rest that they would chitter chatter on Facebook. But I try to take it down to the human element as quick as possible. So get face to face or have a call. And usually that takes them down a notch to know I'm a real person. I'm trying to do the best. I would say also, going along with both mayors, listening is a huge part of what we do. We're the reason why Terence is bouncing is he's probably going to another meeting. I just came from one. And so we're constantly listening to feedback. But you're also listening to a lot of naysayers, which I think is good, because I feel like every naysayer in the room makes whatever that idea or goal that you're moving towards better when you listen to them. But I would say also, there's a point where you kind of have to set them off to the side and say, I appreciate you and I listen to you, but we're moving forward with this. And I think that's helpful from a leadership standpoint, because you can't stay in the unknown forever. Our job is to make decisions and move us forward as a community. And you need to know what they say. And like I said, I want to know who they are and what their concerns are, but definitely want to take us forward. So that listening piece, and I do use social media as a listening tool as well, from both standpoints.
And Sarah, I just wanted to mention to our folks that if you do have a question that pops up as the mayors are answering, you're more than welcome to put it in the chat, and we'll try our best to address it at the end. I just wanted to throw that out there. I think we forgot to. Sorry.
Yes, please put those questions in the chat. We're glad to address those. And so going into our next question, and I'm so glad that you all shared your background, because, aside from Mayor Roberts, who has been running for, some kind of campaign since, intermediate school, it seems like your experiences have really contributed toward what you're doing in your current roles. So how is it different being a leader in more of a corporate organization, with, being a CPA, being a lawyer, even a small business owner, or something that's definitely structured differently versus a civic organization? So Mayor Roberts, I'd like to start with you, specifically in the interest of time, just in case you have to jet off. But let's start with you, and then Mayor Amadon, you, and end with Mayor Smith.
I would say probably from just the direct, I'm still having a hard time with cable here. Can y'all hear me? No? Yes?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good. I saw the terrible internet connection symbol. Just from a small business point of view, and being a State Farm agent, and I'm part of 19,000 agents, and State Farm's a big corporate deal here in the country. Government moves very slow. I mean, as opposed to your own private business or your small business. And so I think probably one of the most frustrating things from a political point of view is moving projects forward. You know, you start thinking about something that you want to do, and it's pretty hard sometimes to turn the ship. And because you got to get a lot of people involved in it, you have to come to consensus. There are a lot of processes. There are second readings, you know, there's the, and you can, and you need everything that you're still planning. And so a little bit different, probably corporately, you know, there's in stroke a pen and get something moving. And that process sometimes with government is just a little slower because you got to have number one, your elected officials, and then you have to get a lot of buy-in from other entities sometimes. So I think for me, that's the biggest thing between government and a corporate structure.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there are a lot of similarities between the two. From a leadership standpoint, I stepped into the mayor role for about a year. I'd worked at Brains on Fire for over 10 years. So was mayor for a year and then became an owner of Brains on Fire the next year. So I joke, mayor life of 1 year really helped set me up for running a company a year later. But I think what it all boils down to is it definitely starts at the top. So knowing that when you're mayor or even, you know, C-suite or, you know, more of an executive at a corporation standpoint, people are looking to you for that vision setting the tone and moving things forward. And I agree with Mayor Roberts. It's super frustrating from a municipality standpoint, how slow everything is. I've been working on this one particular road project for 8 years. I'm like, before in my mayor term, this is going to happen, but in a corporate setting,
Yep.
things just move so much faster. And so having that balance and being and not get frustrated. That's why I was laughing, Sarah, with your patience comment. You got to be more patient in this public sector, and then also like getting the buy-in and knowing that I got to get a whole community somehow behind this particular idea. It takes a lot of that networking piece, but yeah, it starts at the top. So it's really us, and even in the decision making. Also, I will say change is hard. So whether you're talking about a little change, adding a roundabout, which I thought our citizens were going to have a heart attack, they all learned how to run it. It was not the end of the world. People can figure out how to use a roundabout and traverse rest, or if it's something big like a streetscaping project. And your job is to help move them along in that conversation and in the path too. So.
Mayor Smith.
I guess it's my turn. Yeah. From, you know, as a lawyer, I think a lot of people look at politicians, certainly House members and senators, as those bodies being full of lawyers, which can be good, but certainly you need a diverse group of perspectives. So, but being a lawyer, having a legal background, I think allowed me to bring a unique, but obviously not required perspective to the position as lawyer. And there's so much kind of psychology that goes into it too, whether it was, you know, arguing cases in front of a jury or arguing your point on the street in front of folks that, you know, may have just lost a loved one, and or just attending a little old lady's 108th birthday party. I think just being present and showing up, but specifically from a legal perspective, sometimes I have to remember and it's actually kind of relieving sometimes to realize, well, I'm not the city attorney. We've got a great city attorney who happens to be a lifelong friend of mine. So a lot of those legal questions, it actually is a breath of fresh air sometimes, where I don't have to come up with the legal opinion. I can give my input and then rely on our city attorney's opinion. But I think as a CPA, as an insurance agent, as a lawyer, you deal with a ton of different people from diverse backgrounds every day that I think prepared us.
That's great. And I kind of wanted to pivot now to something that I think we all deal with in our organizations that we work for, and was kind of curious, what are some of the general changes that you've seen maybe in your city that you've had to address as mayor, and also from an organizational standpoint, for example, the multi-generational workforce, the dynamic between baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, Gen Z, all in the same workplace, or in your case as mayor, all in the same city. And it seems like more and more of these generations together are becoming more interested in political and civic activities and changes in their surroundings in their town. So I want to kind of get your thoughts on that and how you address that and deal with those changes. And I'll kick it right back to you, Mayor Smith, if that's okay, and then we'll work back.
Sure. Greenwood is a fairly unique place in that Greenwood is the county seat of a 7-county area, is the county seat of Greenwood, which is the hub of a 7-county area we call the Lakelands. So it's Greenwood, Lawrence, Edgefield, Abbeville, McCormick, Newberry, and Saluda. And so I say all that to say we are unique in that, Greenwood, if something happens, we're similarly sized to say a Simpsonville or a Greer, but the leading news in Simpsonville or Greer is probably page 4 or 5 in the Greenville News. Well, in Greenwood, it's going to lead in the Index Journal, and so we are kind of under a microscope a little bit more, just even on a smaller scale, but that means we've got a lot of folks that have been doing things a certain way for a long time, and I think especially in the last 13 and a half months, just understanding, you mentioned multi-generation, but I think changes can be difficult for anyone, whether they're advanced in age and set in their ways or young. Change can be difficult, and so it is making sure that you're confident in the change that you're proposing, and being prepared for the backlash, because there's going to be backlash certain times, and I just am naturally a fairly sensitive person, but I've learned certainly to grow a thicker skin. But I want to make sure I'm answering your question right. But we are not unlike Travelers Rest or Anderston in that we're diverse. So and our city demographics don't necessarily reflect our county demographics, and so it is certainly again, it gets back to listening and making sure that every position is at the table and is being heard.
Sure. Yeah. No, that's great. Mayor Amadon?
I'm not sure if this was exactly the road that you were going down, but what popped up in my head, I think what's unique about Travelers Rest, especially when I first ran for council, is that we had people who had lived here a really long time, and kind of going back to what Brandy was saying about the change piece. It was very hard. But what was interesting as a 26-year-old, when I first ran for council, I had a lot of the elderly residents, because they're the ones that show up to vote, right? Like they're going to be there where it's raining, snowing, but they were very encouraged to have a young person on council. And so knowing that they saw that and put somebody that was 26 in that seat was very interesting. And I think thinking forward to now, where we have had so much growth in Travelers Rest, and we have had people from other states move in, diversity, age, families, not families, people who are retired but 55, I think that's given us a different pool to kind of pull from, but there's still a little bit of that pushback for change. And so it's funny that sometimes I'll have someone who moved here 2 years ago that is very adamant Travelers Rest should not grow anymore. I'm like, no, you moved into TR and made us bigger just electing to buy a house. And so thinking about that, more of a territorial might be a better word, about your space and your home, the diversity piece I'm excited about, because I think that makes us smarter. And I love it when somebody comes into town that has a fresh perspective, but thinking about how we change and how we grow is almost a bigger piece of that than the age space too. And also thinking about families and retired and how we're creating a space for everyone to kind of grow within the city, no matter their age, is important too.
Mayor Roberts, and after this question, we're going to give you first go at the last question because we know you've got to run. So I'll give it away to you.
I've got a bad connection. I don't know what question we're on. I'm frozen.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. No, we were just asking, and actually we could jump to the last question because I know you're on a time limit. So and we definitely wanted to get this to get this one in. But we were just curious, what suggestions do you have for young professionals who are wanting to get more involved in their communities, in their local communities, whether that's running for office or it's just being an involved citizen? What would be your suggestions to them to get more involved? Were you able to catch that?
And I'll give the bad briefly, I mean, if you're not at the table, you're not represented in regards to what's going on in your community. Say that you have to be involved and join organizations like the United Way, YMCA, do what you can to help move the community forward. So that would be my take on it.
Okay, thank you. Hey, and again, we know you have to run, and we just wanted to say before you go, thank you so much for being a part of this, Mayor Roberts.
Thank you.
Sorry. Okay. Okay. Mayor Amadon, did you want to take a shot at that one?
Yeah,
Suggestions for young pros to get involved in the local community early and often?
Yeah, I would just say first, show up. I think just being a part, I think Brandon had mentioned the events. Is it a council meeting? Is it a planning commission meeting? Just show up and listen and try to see how you could be helpful. For me, we have a council, there's 9 of us in total, so me plus 8 council members, and we all have such a diverse background. People are passionate about different things, and for me as mayor, I want to know who you are and what you're passionate about. I have a general rule, like I never turn down coffee or a phone call. So I would just reach out to your local officials. Maybe it's a council member who lives down the street, how you can help, or maybe it's something that you're really passionate about. I have pet peeves about trash. I like for things to be green. You might have something, you might have an aesthetic, or like Terence is in insurance. We used to have an insurance agent on council, and that was so helpful making decisions. It comes up. So I would just say, think how you can take what you love and what you know and what you might be passionate about and funnel it through. It'd be great if you wanted to run for office, but sometimes I just need somebody to ask opinion or make a connection, or planning commission is a big deal for us, and having someone who maybe is in the architect or engineering. And so whatever your chosen profession is, I think you can add to your home by just sharing your skills and passion.
Yeah, that's great. And I think that connects so well to some of the other answers we've heard about just having a seat at the table. And there's just so many ideas between the generations and the different positions in a town or in a city. So bringing what you have to offer to the table sounds incredibly important for all of those perspectives to be heard. But Mayor Smith.
Sure. Yeah. I don't know what y'all's perceptions of Greenwood are, but you may be surprised in a town like Greenwood, while we're not the size of Greenville or even Anderston, but there's an opportunity for everyone's unique skill set and interest. And you mentioned young professionals. We welcome certainly young professionals, young non-professionals as well. I have met some folks across all different backgrounds and with all different types of unique skill sets, people that will inspire you with their kind of their passions. But if you're interested in the arts or animals, outdoors, homelessness, trash, there is something for everyone to get involved in. And I heard, I think Brandy mentioned getting to council meetings. I mean, we love to see council meetings packed, even if they're not there to make public comments, just attending and being part of the process and knowing what's going on. We often hear so much negativity that anytime someone wants to sit down with me about anything, I'm happy to meet with anyone, especially people that want to be part of the solution, rather than just complain about things. And so I heard Brandy mention trash. That was one of my pet peeves also, certainly campaigning, but we've made it a family event. We kind of joked after I got elected that, Michelle Obama's, her initiative was healthy eating. I think Laura Bush's was literacy. Melania Trump's was anti-bullying. So tongue in cheek, we talked about my wife's initiative being trash pickup. And that's one thing that we've gotten started. It's called Trash Time with Tara. It's once a month. And, it is picking up trash, but it's also we're kind of like just spinning our wheels until we stop people from littering in the first place. So there's an educational component to it. And we actually ended up getting a city county trash czar because of everyone's collective desire to do something about trash. But that's just one example of really kind of a snowball effect that you can have on your certain passion.
That's great. And thank you so much for your insight on the majority of our questions. So we're going to go ahead and pivot to our question and answer portion. And we did have a question come up in the chat. And this is what I'm very interested in hearing from you all, especially since you're both kind of new to your mayorhood. But how do you motivate other council members, especially those who have been in their positions for a long time? Who was brave enough to take that on?
I'll go first. I love talking about my council members. We have a really very blessed, great group of people. And that really is the mayor's job to lead this group of people. And I remember another mayor, he told me, he's like, Brandy, sitting in that middle seat's different when you're on council. I was like, okay, sure. But when it actually happens, it really is different. And I really see that as one of my main jobs, is to keep us a cohesive group. I don't need us all to agree all the time. Sometimes it's nice to have a little bit of dissension in there, but I do need us all to be on the same vision for what we want for TR. And we want good things. We want good quality, and we want to, keep our small town. So having us all on that same page, thinking about 8 individual people that all have different motivators. You're always campaigning. If you're in office, it doesn't matter whether it's you're up for re-election, you're always campaigning. And so knowing that that's always a factor. You have individual motivators maybe people who are new, maybe they want to see something different. Some people have been on council for a long time. And so I try to treat each council member differently. I have certain ones that want to be the know-it-all, and that's fine with me. Here, take this and fly, make this happen. I have certain ones that like going under the radar, but want to know all the things. So I try to make sure they stay connected. I have some that I need to call out. What you thinking? I know you got something in your brain. And so it's up to me to kind of know each person and be able to pull them together to get the best out of them. And also to know like what triggers they might have. We all have different things that kind of make us twerk and get frustrated, and to be able to de-escalate as quickly as possible. But I mean, it's really our job to keep everybody on the same page. And also knowing, like, affirming that it's okay if we don't agree, but we are elected to give our perspective and try to make the best decisions together. But also my job of knowing, like, I got to put some effort into those guys, and also delegating. I think Brandon kind of mentioned too about the community events. I have one of our council members, her and I are usually like, you going to this one and I'm going to this one, right? To make sure that we hit together. And so delegating is a big part of that too.
Good. Mayor Smith?
Yeah, I think delegation is kind of a buzzword certainly for us here in Greenwood. But I think Brandy mentioned you want to know what people's passions are and what sets off some certain council members. And so I think it's a good opportunity to, in leading, you want to get to know council members on a personal level. That means oftentimes that can mean going to their church or breaking bread with them in some way. One thing I think you also have to learn is not to take certain things personally when you have disagreements. It's tempting to do that, but I think you can get certainly more accomplished when you don't take things personally, and when you're not concerned about who gets the credit for certain things. But and I think it's important to let that you don't have to certainly tell them this out just directly, but I think it's, and Brandy probably has an interesting perspective on this, having been a council member, but I think it's important that they know the unique perspective that we're in as mayor, and that oftentimes the scrutiny's on us when things go wrong, and it's we're more of the whether you like it or not, and the face of Greenwood, and so we're in the firing, we're in the hot seat. But I think Brandy mentioned one thing: you don't have to agree on everything. There are a number of decisions that I would love to see us make as a united front, but other times I think the public can get cynical when every vote's 7-0 also. So I think it's good when you have dissent sometimes. I mean, if every vote was 7-0, they would think we were rubber stamping everything,
I'll add this too. On council, we usually say too, even if we don't agree, when the majority moves something forward, we support the majority. And so, like, reaffirming that over and over again too. If it's a rezoning and there's two council members that are like, no, I don't think this is smart. But when it moves forward, we're like, okay, we're going to support the whole, and we want to make it as best as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, such good insight. And I think we have time for just, one more question, and then we'll wrap up. But something that I was definitely interested in is knowing the myths. When we had this conversation of what does a mayor do, but what don't they do? What are the powers that be? I'm sure there were probably some things, and Mayor Amadon, you made mention, like, I didn't even know who my mayor was at the time, so if you could think of maybe a myth or an assumption that you had, or a certain expectation that you had for the role of the mayor versus what you actually do, what would be that thing that you would challenge?
I was laughing because one time Halloween was like on a weekday, and I had a constituent that was like, can you not move it to a Saturday? And so I called my city administrator. I was like, Am I in charge of Halloween? No, you're not in charge of Halloween. So I think there's some of the myths is that we're in control of all things. We are not. I'd be more than happy to be in control of all things, but that's not how it works. We're not in control of the school board. I can't make decisions for the school or the HOAs. Those are creatures in their own. I think there's also, and I think rightly so, constituents forget that there's city, county, state, and federal lines. And they're blurred when you're a constituent because you're like, I just have a problem and I need somebody to take care of it. I was listening to the lieutenant governor last week, and she was like, I help at a state level. If you need something at a city or county level, I can't really help you. She didn't say I can't help you, but like you have somebody else that you reach out to. And so I think there's some of those myths that I can make decision for Marietta or Cleveland or something like that. And so just knowing that we have another space. Another myth, I would say it's not quite as sexy as you would think. We talk about trash way more than any normal person should. I mean, like pick up your house trash, not necessarily the pet peeve, people littering. We talk about roads a lot. We talk about benefits. So some of it is like, wah, wah, wah. So it's not the kissing babies thing is the highlight and having fun and celebrating wins for the city. But I think there is that myth that maybe it's a little bit more glamorous than it is. Brandon might have some fun ones too.
Yeah, I think Brandy, I answered the question almost exactly like I would. It's so interesting to hear people's perceptions of what kind of control a mayor has. You know, and it all goes back even to election night when, or election day when people would text me, your name's not on my ballot. Well, do you live in the city limits? No. Well, then it's not going to be on your ballot. And so, you know, there's a lot of helping people. And if it's not something that's within your jurisdiction or something you can help with, it's there. I think a large part of the job is connecting people with their county council member or their state senator or state representative who can help them. And we're lucky to have a great local delegation that can answer some questions. But I think people appreciate when, even if it's not something you can help them with, that you do connect them. But there are also some things that we get involved in that may be technically outside of our purview. And so I think it's an art, not a science, in terms of picking and choosing those battles. As Brandy mentioned, we're not on the school board, but about 2 years ago, a year and a half ago or so, I went before the school board and asked them to rename one of our schools after Benjamin Mays, who was a legendary civil rights figure, probably the most underrated civil rights figure of the 20th century, the mentor who gave the eulogy at Martin Luther King's funeral. But anyway, he is a Greenwood County native. And so it was something that, yeah, it's not in my purview, but I wanted to use my influence to pick one of our very generically named schools like Pinecrest, Lakeview, which doesn't even have a view of a lake, Northside, Westview. I thought surely those don't really mean anything, and surely we can change the name of one of those to name it after our native son. And fortunately, we were able to do it. And so that was just an example of stepping out of the box to do something. But I'm very conscious of knowing, kind of picking and choosing those battles.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for your comments. I'm going to go ahead and pivot this to Justine for our closing remarks. Thanks and announcements.
Thank you so much. Oh, that was great. I think we should do this again when we do Pique in person, don't you? That'd be wonderful.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Speaking of that, we're looking to September, and more information will be coming about that once we've determined what it is we can do and should do. And only wanted to mention that, of course, at the top has a bunch of events coming up. This week we have our second Reconnect, which is donuts and coffee in our community room here next to the office. Small group, socially distanced, and I put the link so if you'd like to register. And of course, our biweekly chats, Upstate Entrepreneur events, and we have an annual air quality meeting coming up in the beginning of May, as well as many other things. So thank you so very much for joining us, and we will let you go and hope that you enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks so much to the mayors and to Jason and Sarah for moderating today.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you guys. Enjoyed it.
Thank you.